So just when you thought that maybe the CDC was going to stay quiet, was going to let cruise ships do their own thing, was going to let cruise ships handle their business, just like they've been doing, well, turns out we're wrong about that. Because guess what? The CDC is back again. They've made some changes to what they're calling their voluntary program. Though I'm not real sure if voluntary is necessarily the right words. But we're going to go ahead and jump on the computer here so we can take a look at what changes the CDC has made. All right, so we jump over here to the CDC's website. We come down here for technical instructions for CDC's COVID-19 program for cruise ships operating in U.S. waters. All right, summary of recent changes for February the 9th of 2022. Updated language for new COVID-19 program for cruise ships operating in U.S. waters. Starts off with the purpose here and just let you know that these instructions are for cruise lines operating foreign flagged cruise ships in U.S. waters that have chosen to opt in to the CDC's COVID-19 program for cruise ships. Okay, cruise ships are defined as all commercial, non-cargo, foreign flagged, passenger carrying vessels subject to the jurisdiction of the United States with the capacity to carry 250 or more individuals, passengers, and crew with an itinerary anticipating an overnight stay on board or a 24-hour stay on board for either passengers or crew. This program is designed to ensure the health and safety protections for travelers, crew, and passengers in a way that mitigates the risk of spreading COVID-19. And we're just going to cover some of the changes here in this document and some of the important information that can give you a little bit of insight into what the cruise lines are going to do or what they're going to have to do based on this guidance. So it says cruise lines choosing to opt into this program on a voluntary basis will be required to follow all recommendations and guidance as a condition of their participation in the program. They will not be able to choose which recommendations to follow. These recommendations are aimed at reducing the introduction and spread of SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, on board cruise ships and are aligned with the current health and safety protocols. The guidance will be reevaluated based on public health conditions and available scientific evidence no later than March 18th of 2022 and updated as needed. All right, opting into CDC's COVID-19 program, cruise lines operating foreign flag cruise ships in U.S. waters that choose to participate in this program on a voluntary basis, opting in, are requested to notify the Maritime Unit in writing of their decision to opt in by February the 18th of 2022. So the cruise lines have to make a decision by February the 18th as to whether or not they are going to or not going to participate in this program. For cruise ship operators opting into the CDC's COVID-19 program for cruise ships, the CDC will continue to exercise enforcement discretion regarding the requirements of its January 29, 2021 mask order applicable to operators of and crew and passengers on board cruise ships. Cruise lines operating in U.S. waters choosing not to participate in the program, opting out, are requested to notify CDC's Maritime Unit in writing by February the 18th of 2022. All right, so the cruise lines, like I said, by February the 18th, they either have to opt in or opt out, volunteer or don't volunteer. But here are some of the changes that the cruise lines will have to look at if they decide to opt in. Cruise ship vaccination status classifications. As part of the CDC's COVID-19 program for cruise ships, cruise ship vaccination status classifications are defined as not highly vaccinated, ships with less than 95% passengers and 95% crew who are fully vaccinated. So if the cruise ship is less than 95%, they're considered not highly vaccinated. Highly vaccinated are ships with at least 95% passengers and 95% crew who are fully vaccinated, but with less than 95% of passengers and 95% of crew who are up to date with their COVID-19 vaccinations. And finally, vaccination standard of excellence. Ships with at least 95% passengers and 95% crew who are up to date with their COVID-19 vaccines. And what the CDC means by up to date with your COVID-19 vaccines is booster shots. So highly vaccinated is 95% or above of the ship being vaccinated, and vaccination standard of excellence is more than 95% fully vaccinated with their booster shots. Okay, because remember, the CDC has now defined fully vaccinated or up-to-date vaccinated, including booster shots. All right, cruise lines that choose to participate in the CDC's COVID-19 program must advise CDC of the vaccination status classification for each participating ship. This information will be included on the CDC's cruise ship color status page. Ships adhering to the highly vaccinated or vaccination standard of excellent classifications must maintain these thresholds for each voyage. All right, so that means if a cruise ship chooses to be highly vaccinated, they have to stay that way. If they choose to be the vaccination standard of excellence, they're going to have to stay that way. And we'll take a look at number 6 here, which gives us that definition of up to date with COVID-19 vaccine means a person has received all recommended COVID-19 vaccines, including any booster doses when eligible. So the next session here is going to be about what happens if you have to quarantine. Now, the CDC has broken it down into 2 categories, the highly vaccinated and the excellence vaccination crews, and it actually has 2 different standards for that. Let's take a look at that. All travelers on board the cruise ship with signs and symptoms of COVID-19, regardless of vaccination status, must be isolated and tested for SARS-CoV-2 infection immediately upon notifying medical staff of symptom onset. Results must be reported to the CDC. All right, now because of the potential for asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic transmission, it is important that close contacts of individuals with SARS-CoV-2 infection be quickly identified and tested. So on ships that have a vaccination standard of excellence classification, close contacts must quarantine until at least 5 full days after their last exposure. The day of the last close contact is counted as day 0. They must receive a viral test immediately and on day 5 or later before ending quarantine. If they remain asymptomatic after 5 days and both tests are negative, they may end quarantine, but must continue to properly wear a well-fitted mask for 5 days anytime they are around others. During days 6 through 10 after their last exposure, these individuals must have in-cabin dining and properly wear a well-fitted mask at all times when outside of their cabin. They must also wear a well-fitting mask inside their cabin if any other person, such as a crew member, enters the cabin. Now, on ships that do not have a vaccination standard of excellence, close contacts must quarantine for at least 10 days after their last exposure. The day of last close contact is counted as day 0. They must receive a viral test immediately and on day 10 before ending quarantine. If they remain asymptomatic after 10 days and both tests are negative, they may end quarantine. So on cruise ships that require booster shots, you quarantine for 5 days. On cruise ships that don't require booster shots, you quarantine for 10 days, according to what the CDC has right here. So these are the changes that the CDC has basically added on to what were the technical instructions already existing, the ones that expired and went into a voluntary status on January the 15th. These are just some of the changes they made. So all of the existing technical instructions are still there, still in place under the voluntary status, whether cruise ships can volunteer in or not. Now, CLIA, on the other hand, they're not super happy about these new guidance. They don't really feel that the CDC is operating within accordance to what's actually happening on cruise ships. And they put out a statement saying that the CDC guidance, like I said, is out of step and unnecessary. The result has been a dramatic drop in the number of COVID positive cases with hospitalization being extraordinarily rare, the CLIA statement read. The latest CDC guidance appears out of step with the actual public health conditions on cruise ships and unnecessary in light of social trends away from more restrictive measures. It seems unnecessarily discriminatory against cruises to maintain that the chances of getting COVID-19 on a cruise ship is very high, even if you're up to date with your COVID-19 vaccines. And like I said, and that is a statement from CLIA. And the CDC has responded. The CDC has given their own statement as well, and it says cruises will be regulated by the CDC regardless of a commitment to volunteer. The CDC has said its new program is voluntary. Cruise lines can choose whether or not to participate, but voluntary doesn't mean that cruise ships will not be regulated by the CDC, regardless of whether they opt into the program. Cruise ship operators can choose the healthy sail option, or they can choose to kind of do their own thing, but it's important to keep in mind that ships will still be under CDC's regulatory authority, and if a cruise line chooses to opt out of the program, its ships would then fall under the CDC's mask order for public transportation and the agency's regulatory authority for inspections. And all cruise ships, regardless of participation in the voluntary program, will still be required to report every COVID-19 case on board, just through a different mechanism than the way it reports cases now. And if the CDC is concerned about COVID-19 on a ship that isn't under the new program, they said, I think we will be probably quicker to exercise our regulatory authority because, we won't know what's happening on the ship as far as the mitigation measures. And the CDC reserves the right to issue a no-sail order for a particular ship if the agency has concerns about what's happening on board. So what do y'all think of that statement? So the cruise lines have till February 18th to decide to volunteer or not volunteer for this program. But is it really an option? Is it really volunteering when the CDC says, hey, if you don't volunteer, if you don't do what I want, don't forget, we could act against you faster. We could issue a no-sail order on your particular ship because, we won't know what's going on. Even if they don't participate, they still have to report their COVID cases. They still have to report what's going on there. But if you don't volunteer, we could shut your cruise ship down because we have the authority to do so. So I ask, is it really a volunteer program, or is this just an extension of what we had prior to January the 15th? That's what it sounds like to me. Now, I could be reading it wrong. Maybe I'm taking it wrong. But I'm not sure volunteering is really the right word. This sounds a little more like a voluntold than a volunteer. But at the end of the day, I'm honestly not surprised. I think we all really honestly knew that come January the 15th, the CDC wasn't really going to take too big of a step back. Didn't really expect them to take their hand out of that cookie jar. And of course, if the cruise lines want to continue sailing and we want to continue to take cruises, well, this unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, is what we're going to have to do. And look, I know I've said it myself before. Others have said it before. Why does it seem like the CDC is picking on the cruise lines? Why doesn't the CDC pick on sporting events, concerts, amusement parks, the airlines? Why? Well, honestly, the bottom line is, truthfully, the CDC doesn't have the authority or the ability to pick on those people. It doesn't have the authority to set rules and regulations for a lot of these other industries. The one it can mess with is the cruise lines, and it's the one that it messes with. That's kind of their whipping boy. That's the one that they can exercise control over, so it's the one that they do exercise control over. But let me know what y'all think below. What do y'all think of the new CDC guidelines? Is this going to mean cruise lines are going to start requiring booster shots? I don't know yet. Going to have to kind of keep an eye on it and take a look at it. I have seen some of the cruise lines mention that boosters could possibly be a requirement in the future, and perhaps that wording was just for this very thing right here. Perhaps it had something to do with them knowing that something like this was coming. That's a distinct possibility. And we may see booster shot requirements. Possibly. But we'll keep our eye out and we'll see what happens with that as well. But alright, I hope everybody has enjoyed today's video, at least as much as someone can enjoy the CDC continuing to be in our cruising business. Even though I feel the cruise lines are doing a really good job, they want to keep the COVID cases down. They don't want outbreaks on their ships. I think they're already trying to do the right thing, and they're basically following the CDC's guidance anyway. I mean, Norwegian has already opted in before these were even put out. So I don't really think a lot is going to change in the way we cruise right now, but we'll see over time. So again though, if you did enjoy today's video, do me a favor, smash that like button. Have yourself a great day. And like always, we will see you out on the high seas.